Some games feel like chewing glass on your first try, confusing controls, brutal difficulty, or just slow burn stories that make you want to quit. But give them time, and after a few hours, you're hooked, you're obsessed, you're dreaming about it. Today we're diving into 17 games you'll probably hate at first, but later won't be able to shut up about. Bloodborne doesn't ease you in, it throws you into a nightmare with a stick and says, figure it out. The first few hours are pure frustration. You'll die to werewolves, mobs, and bosses that look like they were stitched together in a fever dream. The controls feel too fast, the pacing unforgiving. But somewhere in the mess, the world pulls you in. You start noticing how every alley is connected, how combat rewards aggression and timing, and how each weapon has its own rhythm. Before you know it, you're staying up late, reading lore theories, and fighting bosses just for the fun of it. It's the kind of game that earns your respect, and eventually your obsession, through sheer, unfiltered brutality. Dark Souls doesn't want to impress you, it wants to test you. No tutorials, no map, just vague item descriptions and enemies that will punish every mistake. The first time you play, it feels like the game is broken, until you realize it's just very deliberate. You'll hate how slow it feels at first, how cruel it is to newbies, and how cryptic the world seems. But once the pieces click together, it becomes addictive. You start memorizing enemy placements, building your perfect loadout, and even embracing the punishing challenge. What felt impossible now feels fair. What was once confusing becomes second nature. It evolves from frustrating to exhilarating with nothing more than your perseverance. Dead Rising seems like it should be fun right away, zombies, mauls, and all kinds of wacky weapons. But then you meet the save system, the timer, and the questionable AI. You'll feel overwhelmed, confused, and probably lose a few survivors right off the bat. But there's something weirdly special under the jank. The timer isn't there to frustrate, it adds tension. The crafting system becomes hilariously brilliant, and the way the game encourages multiple playthroughs reveals just how much detail is packed in. The more time you give it, the more it rewards you with absurdity and charm. Dead Rising is messy and flawed, but if you give it a chance, you'll be slicing through the undead with a lawnmower and a smile. The opening hours of Death Stranding are famously slow. You're a courier, carrying boxes across a haunting landscape with no music and constant rain. It feels tedious, like a walking simulator with too many buttons. But then something strange happens. You start to care. You find joy in plotting routes, avoiding hazards, and appreciating the connections you're building with others. The asynchronous multiplayer kicks in, and structures left by other players become lifelines. The emotional storytelling creeps in slowly but hits hard. Kojima's bizarre world begins to make a kind of poetic sense. It transforms from boring to beautiful if you let it. Once you're hooked, there's no going back. Disco Elysium throws you into the mind of a hungover detective who can't remember his name. You're assaulted with walls of dialogue, skill checks you don't understand, and a pace that feels like molasses. There's no traditional combat and almost too much reading. But stick with it and you discover a narrative experience like no other. The game is smart, funny, sad, and weird in ways that keep unraveling. Every choice you make feels significant, every conversation a puzzle. The inner voice mechanic grows on you until you find yourself arguing with your own thoughts. It's not a game for everyone, but for those who let it in, it becomes unforgettable.
Face you. She has an airship airbag in her hand. She seems to be in a hurry. Okay, don't say you need to.
Dragon's Dogma makes a bad first impression, the graphics feel outdated, the story seems generic, and the UI is unintuitive. But then the combat surprises you. It's deep, it's fast, and it lets you climb on giant monsters like a medieval Shadow of the Colossus. The pawn system, which initially feels confusing, becomes one of the most unique mechanics in any RPG. You start to understand how exploration and day-night cycles change the experience. The deeper you go, the more the game opens up into something truly special. It doesn't hold your hand, and that's part of its charm. You go from, why does this feel off, to why aren't more games like this?
I've had quite enough of battle.
Elden Ring gives you freedom and then immediately punishes you for using it. You wander off and get squashed by a tree sentinel or ambushed in a cave. The map is enormous, the story is buried in item descriptions, and no one tells you where to go. It's overwhelming, but that freedom eventually becomes addictive. Every new area feels like a reward, every hidden boss a challenge worth mastering. You build your character how you want, find weird weapons, and stumble upon secrets that feel truly earned. The more you play, the more it becomes clear. It's not aimless, it's just letting you make the adventure your own. And that's what makes it unforgettable. When you first boot up Far Cry Primal, it feels like Far Cry without all the fun toys. No guns, no vehicles, just sticks and stones. The caveman setting feels limiting, and the story doesn't immediately grip you. But once you get into the rhythm of survival, taming beasts, crafting tools, and exploring a brutal open world, it starts to click. The game's audio design and primal atmosphere become strangely immersive. The slower pace becomes satisfying. Eventually, you realize how much depth is hidden under its Stone Age surface. It's not the loudest Far Cry, but it's one of the most unique, and over time it earns your respect. This game doesn't care if you're having fun. At first, it feels like a historical simulator with stiff controls, clunky combat, and way too many systems. You'll struggle with lockpicking, get lost often, and die in sword fights you barely understand. But once you learn its logic and adapt to its realism, it becomes one of the most rewarding RPGs out there. The world is alive in a way few games manage. People remember your actions, time matters, combat becomes tactical and satisfying. It's not about being a hero, it's about surviving and growing. It's hard to love early on, but eventually, you won't want to leave medieval Bohemia. Prey starts with mystery, but not much momentum. The weapons feel weak, the enemies are annoying little jump scare blobs, and your objectives seem all over the place. But slowly the pieces fall into place. You begin experimenting with your tools, unlocking new powers, and realizing how much freedom the game gives you. The space station becomes a sandbox full of possibilities. The story, once confusing, becomes deeply intriguing. You'll start backtracking not because you have to, but because you want to see what you missed. It's a slow burn, but once it clicks, it becomes one of the smartest immersive sims you've ever played. Rainworld makes no apologies for how hard it is. The game gives you a fragile little slug cat and tosses you into a brutal ecosystem. Nothing is explained. The enemies are faster, stronger, and often smarter than you. You'll die a lot, usually without knowing why, but then something strange happens. You start understanding it. You learn to read the world, recognize predator patterns, and use your environment to survive. It becomes less about brute force and more about instinct. The loneliness turns to serenity. When you make it through a dangerous area alive, it feels like a personal victory. Rainworld demands patience, but gives back so much more. Xcom 2 punishes mistakes like a drill sergeant. Your favorite soldier will get crit by an alien and die, and there's nothing you can do. Early missions feel stacked against you, but as you learn the systems, how to flank, how to use cover, how to manage resources, the game transforms. You start planning 5 moves ahead, customizing your squad, and investing emotionally in every mission. It's tense, stressful, and deeply satisfying when things go right. The randomness still stings, but victory feels earned. What once felt unfair becomes thrilling. It's strategy that bites back, and once it grabs you, it doesn't let go.
Heading out.
Sekiro might be the most unforgiving game on this list. It doesn't let you grind or summon help. You either learn to deflect attacks with perfect timing or face constant failure. Early bosses feel like walls. The combat demands precision, speed, and a whole lot of dying. But once the mechanics click, it's pure satisfaction. Each enemy becomes a test of skill, each victory a result of mastery, not luck. You start to feel the rhythm of the fights, anticipating patterns like a martial artist. It's not just a game, it's a training ground. And once you adapt, it becomes almost impossible to put down. The Last Guardian can be frustrating from the start. Trico doesn't always listen, the controls are awkward, and it often feels like you're wrestling the game instead of playing it. But it's all in service of something emotional. As the bond between the boy and Trico deepens, you begin to care. The clumsiness becomes charm, the struggle's part of the journey. You'll find yourself forgiving the game's flaws because the connection it builds is so real. It's not about perfect mechanics, it's about heart. And by the end, that bond becomes something truly unforgettable. Days Gone feels like a generic open-world zombie game at first. The pacing is slow, the motorcycle maintenance is annoying, and Deacon doesn't immediately win you over. But as you keep going, the world starts to feel more personal. The story gets stronger, the horde mechanics become thrilling, and the camp dynamics begin to matter. Taking down a massive horde with traps and strategy feels incredible. The game takes time to get going, but once it does, it becomes deeply engaging. It's not groundbreaking, but it's surprisingly heartfelt and satisfying. Fallout 4 starts with potential, but can feel underwhelming early on. The story setup is rushed, and the base building feels forced. The shooting is fine, but not remarkable, and companions can feel lifeless. But then you start customizing weapons, exploring every building, and experimenting with settlements. You find your groove, and suddenly, hours disappear. The world starts to feel lived in, the choices begin to matter, and your character truly becomes your own. It's a game that opens up slowly but becomes a playground for creativity and survival. It grows on you more than it impresses you up front. Finally, we have my favorite game, Red Dead Redemption 2. This game can feel more like a slow-motion cowboy simulator than a game at first. The opening hours are heavy with long rides, methodical animations, and what seems like way too much realism. It feels like the game is dragging its feet on purpose. But as you lean into its deliberate pace, something changes. The weight of every moment begins to matter. The bond with your horse, the way Arthur interacts with others, even the tiniest details like making coffee at camp, they all start to add up. You begin to feel more like a part of the world than just a player passing through, and once that clicks, you stop rushing. You soak in the world, one cigarette puff and sunset at a time. Alright, so these are the games that test your patience but reward your loyalty. You might uninstall them once or twice, but once they sink their claws in, it's obsession time. Which one of these games did you rage quit and then fall in love with? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this list, hit like, smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one.